Hey, which one of these descriptions sounds most like you? A. Gravitates towards comfort, sometimes gets defensive around others, and sets limitations on oneself. Or B. Perpetually improves oneself, values discomfort, and prioritizes growth through failure. An even better question may be is, which one would others think most sounds like you? Remember, sometimes those pesky blind spots can get in our way. I'm Antonio, and today I'm going to be your leadership coach. If you've seen the title, you know already that today we're going to be talking about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. In earlier episodes, we've said that, as a leader, there's certain things that are holding you back. It might be blind spots, it might be biases or self-limiting beliefs. It might be a fixed mindset. It might be comfort zones. All of those things we cover, but over the next 35 to 40 minutes or so, we're going to figure out whether you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, what that means, how you can fix it, and how you can even figure it out. Why? Well, in this way, you can finally begin to stop managing and start leading. In our book, My Daily Leadership, we talk a lot, we do a deep dive, we talk a lot about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. There's a lot of research that says that most people tend to think that they're above average in terms of driving skill. Most people think they're an above average driver. Having lived in Miami for 12 years and driven around lots, you'll know that actually cannot possibly be true. But here's the thing. We all kind of think that we're a pretty good driver. And some of us may be, right? A friend of mine says they're a great driver because they've never been in an accident. They failed to mention that they've seen 400 in the rear view mirror, but we skate past that one. The point is that most of us think that we have a growth mindset too. And then some of us do, but some of us don't. And so I'm going to draw you a model today, like we do in most of our episodes. And I'd like you, as you're watching it, just try and determine, is that me? Is that me? Is that me? Right? And then if you really want to find out, then please think about taking one of our assessments that you'll see on our website, www.mydailyleadership.com, if you want to know more and actually get an objective, not a subjective view of just how fixed your mindset is, where it's fixed and where you have a growth mindset, how parts of it are propelling you forward and which parts are holding you back. And if you're sufficiently motivated and you want to improve yourself, your people and your business, and future-proof yourself, your people and your business, then maybe you'll take an assessment. Also to say that whilst ever we're drawing our model today and all other models that we draw, they are all going to be available as a complimentary digital download. So do go to www.mydailyleadership.com/podcast and you can download this and then you can take the assessment. It's right around the corner. So here's what we're going to do today. First of all, we're going to just divide our piece of paper into two, and we're going to explore on one side a growth mindset and the other side a fixed mindset. So let's do a bit of a deeper dive into a growth mindset. What does it mean? What does it look like? How do we measure it? Where does it help us and all of that kind of stuff? So let's do a growth mindset down here, and we're going to explore that. What we're actually going to do, it's not how we put it in the book, and it's not quite how we do it in any of our training sessions for our leaders. But I'm going to do a kind of a small version of a mind map, which was developed by a good British psychologist and leader, a chap called Tony Buzan. So you may have seen mind maps. If you haven't, please do try and find out a little bit more about them. Do figure out how mind maps work. and it's a tremendous leadership tool. You know, you may have learnt them at university or college. It's a great way to help people remember things and to kind of plot things together. And anyway, this isn't an advert for mind maps, but we're kind of going to show you as an easy, quick, ready reckoner today what a growth mindset looks like, what a fixed mindset looks like, kind of wrap it into a mind map for you. And remember, as we go into each of these particular areas, that for the purposes of speed and ease today, we're not going to go super deep into them. So we'll probably start at 30,000 feet, maybe get down to 10,000 feet, but we won't go as far as 5,000 feet. But if you want to know more, get the book, get the assessment, reach out to us and we'll help you out. All right, so a growth mindset. Let's think about the things that a growth mindset requires or involves, encapsulates, don't know. So let's think about 4 areas, growth mindset, and we'll be looking at 4 areas of a fixed mindset. So we'll come on to these a little bit later on. As I said, it's kind of a Tony Buzan mind map, not quite. So let's think about, just take a second and think, well, what does a growth mindset look like for a leader? Take a second, think about that. Well, let's agree early on, and I'm sure there's not going to be any resistance to this, a leader with a growth mindset, first of all, loves team success. Of course they do. So, love team success. Perfect. What else? Well, they are comfortable with growth through failure. Growth. And this is a really important piece. We'll come back to it in a moment and go into a little bit more detail. But, you know, if we're not prepared to fail, then unfortunately we don't have a growth mindset. So we have to be okay failing, knowing that there are good failures and there are bad failures. There are right wrongs and there are wrong wrongs. Right wrong is a good failure. What does that mean? It means something that we tried and we've failed and we've learned. And if we've learned from failure, that's a good failure. If we haven't learned from failure and we keep repeating it, it's Groundhog Day and we fail and we repeat, we fail, and they're bad failures, right? So growth through failure, and we mean the right kind of failure. What does that mean? Also with a growth mindset, we have to value discomfort. And we know that there's no growth in our comfort zone, and we know that there's no comfort in our growth zone. And if we are going to be a leader with a growth-oriented mindset, we know that we're going to have to value discomfort because we're going to have to deal with change. What else does a growth mindset leader, what other attributes do they have? Well, they perpetually improve themselves. So it perpetually improves oneself. So good. Well, how do we know? Like, what do they look like, right? So if there is somebody that loves team success, what does that mean? Well, I guess we could say if anybody loves team success, they kind of have 3 particular attributes. 1, they advocates for the team. And you know what advocates mean, right? So they fight for the team. Good. So they advocate for the team. We'll talk about what that means in a minute, but let's just say the leader with a growth mindset that loves team success advocates for the team. They have a servant leader attitude. So servant leader. Talk about what that means a little bit later on. And they empower. They are an empowering leadership. They empower others. Empower others. Okay, cool. So that's fairly self-explanatory and encapsulated. If you're a leader with a growth mindset, you love team success, which means you advocate for the team, you have a servant leader mentality, right? And you empower others. So Think about, when was the last time you advocated for your team? When was the last time you displayed true servant leadership? If you think about your organogram, think about, your hierarchy, your histogram, the structure of your organization. If you look at an organogram and you think, well, all of these people, oftentimes we're talking to a leader and we say, show me on your organogram, here's you, show me all the people that work for you. And then they show all of the people that are beneath them, right? It's like a pyramid going down. Here's the leader at the top, and then all the people below them. And we say, okay, great. And who works for you? They say, well, these guys all work for me. We say, okay, well, who do you work for? And you think, they have a think about that. And actually, if you think about it, turn that whole thing upside down. Your job as a leader, they don't work for you. They've got their jobs to do. You work for them, right? So turn that whole thing upside down. So think about that in terms of servant leadership and empowering others and empowering leadership. Okay, what about perpetually improves oneself? What does that look like? So let's just have a look at those three things. Then somebody that perpetually improves themselves, they are innately curious, so curiosity. So they have great curiosity. They have intuitive thinking. We talk a lot about intuition in the book and in our program. How do we develop that insight, right? So intuitive thinking. And they are also constantly diving into the realms of the possible. So they think of possibility. So they're possibility oriented. Possibility oriented. My wife has a great expression about some people that of a fixed mindset, and they say the problem with that person is they have a problem for every solution, not a solution for every problem. So this guy here is very solutions oriented. Tell you a quick story. Years ago, more years ago than I care to remember, I had a very senior position in a really globally represented organization. It was a public company. You might call it like a Fortune 60 company. And I had been poached. I was moving on. I was going to another organization that needed my help. And I handed my notice in. In that organization, it was standard for the VP of HR to write the references for all of the, the board of directors, the executive suite, right? So it was only not the person that you reported to, like the group chairman or anything like that. The VP of HR wrote everybody's reference. Anyway, this particular company had an head of HR called Mike. Anyway, I just handed my notes in a couple of days beforehand, and I happened across Mike in the car park, and Mike said, Antonio, I hear you going, that's terrible, that's terrible. I said, well, yeah, Mike, there's this organization, they need some help, and I said I'd go help them out. And he said, well, don't worry, he said, I'm going to give you a good reference. So being the nosy chap I was, I said, okay, Mike, thanks very much, knowing that Mike would be the one to write my reference. And I said to Mike, so what are you going to say about me, Mike? And he thought about it for a second, and he said, I am going to give you the most glowing reference I give anybody. I said, oh, what's that? He said, well, of all the people I have ever worked with or for, he said, you are the most solutions-oriented director, most solutions-oriented individual that I've ever worked with. And he said, and that's the highest compliment I can give anybody. Oh, thanks very much, Mike. And I said, what makes you say that, right? And I wasn't fishing for a compliment, right? I'm like, I didn't know that that's how he thought about me. And it was after that conversation, I started to think a lot about, what does solutions orientation mean? And Mike said, well, look, Antonio, you came with challenges and issues and problems, but you never came without some possible solutions. You always said, hey guys, here's the problem, and we can either do A, we can either do B, we can either do C, or if anybody's got any better ideas, let's do D. Let's talk about that. And he said, you were always very open, you always brought solutions, and you were very open to change that solution, to have somebody else's solution. You never let your ego get in the way. You were very solutions oriented. And since that day, whenever I have been interviewing for people to work for me, we take a long time looking at how solutions oriented they are. It's easy to bring problems. It's easy for anybody to go, boss, here's the problem, and here's the problem, and here's the problem, and here's the problem. And you say, okay, what should we do about it? And they go, search me, right? I'm not interested in people that bring me problems. I'm interested in people bringing me problems, yes, and potential solutions. Because let's be honest, the people at the coalface know much more than I do, than I can ever know, right? And so being solutions-oriented and possibility-oriented is so important. And good, that's part of a growth mindset. Anyway, slight interlude. All right, what's growth through failure look like? Well, that looks like, you have to be naturally optimistic and buoyant, so optimism. Being, listen, the world is difficult. We're going to have challenges. As a leader, we face challenges every day. We face change every day. And if we're not naturally buoyant, right, and optimistic, in the roles that we have, we must expect a lot of rejection, a lot of frustration, a lot of failure. So we need to be optimistic. And as I said, I'll tell you a little bit later on what things fall into creating somebody that's optimistic, right? But optimistic, somebody also that embraces critique. We talk a lot at MDL, My Daily Leadership, about the difference between critique and criticism. Not in the least bit interested in criticism, incredibly open to critique, right? That's the good and the bad. That talks about role performance in a way that also builds up the individual. If we talk about a role performance in a way that diminishes the individual, well, that's criticism, right? No one's interested in that. But critique, the leader that doesn't embrace critique, that's the good and the bad, that doesn't ask for that kind of feedback and act upon it, and not get all sulky with a quivering bottom lip if somebody tells them something they don't like, right? So embracing critique, very important. And somebody with resilience and drive and grit and all of that kind of stuff, right? So resilience, drive, and grit. Cool. Let's talk about valuing discomfort. Well, as you might imagine, that's got something to do with expanding comfort zones. If you haven't yet seen our episode about comfort zones, no growth in your comfort zone, no comfort in your growth zone, and how do we go from our comfort zone through the fear zone to the learning zone to the growth zone, right? So comfort zone. Composure under pressure, so composure. Now, composure under pressure, that has a lot to do with EQ, emotional intelligence, right? It's easy to be a great boss when things are easy peasy lemon squeezy. When things are tricky, that's when things get tricky, right? So composure under pressure, it's how we react versus, or rather how we respond versus how we react. It's impulse control, it's empathy, and all of that good EQ stuff. Lots of our leaders, when they first engage with us, they think, look, leadership success is all about IQ and technical skill. We quickly disavow them of that, and they quickly learn that EQ is like 400 times more important to success than IQ. So anyway, composure under pressure, which is an IQ thing, and another key element is the ability to thrive under uncertainty. One of the things that's certain about leadership is there's lots of uncertainty, right? So if you can't thrive under uncertainty, can't deal with situations that are volatile, uncertain, you're going to struggle a little bit. So what does that look like? Again, we'll come back to that later on. So at 30,000 feet, Those are the elements of a growth mindset. So let's take a super quick coffee break. So first of all, I'd just like to say, for those who are new, a very quick welcome. My name is Antonio, and I'm the founder of this organization. I'm the president of My Daily Leadership. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm a business leader, probably like you. I've written 3 books. We have a 4th one in play. We've signed a contract for. We work with everyone from scrappy startups. We love those guys, all the way up to Fortune 60s, helping them develop their leadership competencies and drive sustainable growth, help them deal with things like growth and fixed mindsets. And when we launched this podcast, our goal was super simple, really. We just wanted to give leaders just like you some real value, real ROI for your time, effort, and energy that you spend with us. We know that you're exceptionally busy. At least we hope you are. So we make sure that every episode gives you practical models and insights. Like today, I'm hoping you're finding something useful today, something you can apply right away. And if you have and do find value in this episode so far, and I hope you have and you will, then take a moment to like this video. It might take you as many as 3 seconds. Also, why don't you subscribe on YouTube? That might take you another 1 second. And follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Why not? Your support genuinely helps us reach more lovely leaders like you and helps them find us more easily. And if you're on YouTube, drop us your biggest leadership comment challenge in the comments, right? We'll either send you to a relevant episode that we've already created, or we'll create a new one just for you. And genuinely, we mean that. We really, really mean that. And we really, really do read and reply to every comment. So before we get back into it and have a look at the fixed mindset, remember all of the models we discuss in this episode and all future episodes and all past episodes, you can download for free, for nothing. Cornelia, our podcast producer, takes this dreadful sketch that I put together and she turns them into a very clean, very professional, lovely, super duper models that you can download and you can reference anytime and share with your colleagues. And all you need to do is head over to www.mydailyleadership.com/podcast and you can download this and all of them today. So let's get back to today's lesson and think about, well, what's the opposite of that? What does a fixed mindset look like versus a growth mindset? So let's dive in. Okay, so let's have a look at a fixed mindset. 4 main components as the growth mindset. So let's say high need. So let's just put a need for external approval. External approval. You have to feel sorry for Cornelia, don't you? Try and make something useful out of all of this. Fixed mindset's also somebody that sets limitations on oneself. I know that's not you, but people do. Some people are, perish the thought, defensive around others. Again, I know that's never going to be you. And then some people, kind of as we were talking about earlier, they kind of gravitate towards comfort. And unfortunately, if you are a leader, a discomfort is baked in, right? So get used to that bad news if you can. All right. Need for external approval. What does that mean? Well, it's somebody that's offended easily by criticism or critique, right? If you are easily offended by critique, if you are easily offended, maybe this isn't the job for you, right? High need for approval. If you have a need for approval, it's a great question. Need for approval. I'm going to ask you some questions and think about, if a leader has a high need for approval, do they find doing these things easier or more difficult? So let's just think about this for a second. So If I say, if we have a leader who has a high need for approval, how good are they, do you think, at holding people and themselves accountable? Not very good. If you have a high need for approval, how good are you at having the important and difficult conversations? Not very good. How good are you at developing your people? Not very good. And yourself? Not very good. How good are you at making sure that sometimes the right policy is the difficult policy? How good are you at all of those? Not very good. How good? Remember, as leaders, we encourage what we tolerate. If we have a high need for approval, do we tolerate too much? Yes, we do. What's the best way to cheese off our A players? It's to just accept nonsense from our C players. If you have a high need for approval, you tend to do that, right? So the high need for approval is bad for leadership. We need the right level of need for approval, but a high need for approval, that's going to slow you down. Have you got a high need for approval? Do you know? Take an assessment. Take our assessment. Figure it out. Okay, need for approval. Fears unexpected outcomes. Fairly self-evident, but if you're so fearful that you do nothing, then that's not good for leadership, right? At My Daily Leadership, we talk a lot about, hey, listen, just make a start, make an imperfect start, maybe make an uncomfortable start. Don't wait till it's perfect. Course correct along the way. We steal mercilessly from Ernest Hemingway. I think probably the best thing he ever wrote was to begin. And as far as leadership is concerned, that's great. So just get over our fears, make a start, figure it out. I used to have a chairman that says, be bold. Boldness has magic and power all itself. And he's right. He had this carved in a huge block of wood behind his desk. And I would go into his office sometimes and I'd say, hey boss, we got a challenge. This is happening and this is happening and this is happening. We could do this, we could do this, we could do this. What do you think? And he would just look at me and he would point behind his head like this. He would point behind his head, but basically said, be bold, boldness has magic and power all its own. And he was telling me, do the risky thing, do the boldest thing, do the most outrageous and audacious thing. Just do the bravest thing. And we'll course correct and we'll figure it out as we go along, right? He gave me permission to be bold. Imagine that. Gave me permission. And then if the wheels fell off, we got back up, put the wheels on and we started again. Think about it this way. Here's how he used to talk about it. Next week I'm going to get on a flight. I'm going to get on a flight from Paris to New Delhi in India. I think it's about 8 or 9 or 10 hour flight. Anyway, going from Paris to India. The pilot is going to log his flight path, with the FAA. He's going to make sure that everybody knows who he is, where he's going, and who's on the plane, and all of that good stuff, right? And they're going to set course for the airport, right? New Delhi, 10 hours away, let's say. So he won't, or she won't, they won't take off out of Charles de Gaulle, go on a bearing of whatever it is to go to New Delhi, and in 9-10 hours later, just land the plane with their eyes shut, right? Because the chances of us landing in the middle of the runway are 0. And every single pilot knows that they're going to take off and they're going to have to course correct along the way. There's going to be weather, there's going to be traffic, there's going to be instructions from the ground, there's going to be things that they move to avoid, there's going to be turbulence, there's going to be a million things. And they're perfectly okay with knowing that they're going to make a start and they'll figure it out as they go, right? They'll course correct all along the way. Well, if pilots do that, why can't leaders do that too, right? So be brave. It has magic and power all its own. So, okay, let's move on. Sets limits on oneself. What does that look like? Well, people that set limits on themselves, they're kind of very stuck in their routine. You know what I mean? So how should we write that? So they're bound, B-O-U-N-D, bound by routine. Don't be that person. They avoid taking the initiative. So avoid initiative. Did I spell that right? You get the idea. By the time you see it as a download, Cornelia would have fixed it. And they are pessimistic. Okay, cool. What about those who are defensive around others? Well, first of all, they're fairly suspicious. You can't be a leader if you don't trust people, right? Because nothing happens in any organization other than through people, right? They are too competitive, so too competitive. A certain amount of competition is right, but I can't remember who was, some very wise leader that says it's amazing what can be accomplished if you don't care who gets credit, right? We don't want people who are always on the stage. We want people who are happy to, pass credit on to others. And defensive around others, fixed mindset, and they are independent of others. Independent of others. That's a bad thing for leaders. I'm sure you can agree. Leadership is a team sport, right? It's not golf. Gravitates towards comfort. What does that mean? That means they avoid conflict. If you avoid conflict, that's going to hold you back as a leader. If you default or defend the status quo, that's bad for a leader. I used to have another boss that said, hey, listen, our job as leaders is to kill the sacred cows, right? We have to beat down silos. Anybody says not invented here, that's bad news. Anyone that says that's the way we've always done it around here, boss, that's bad news, right? We're not interested in the status quo, and they are also easily discouraged, and we don't want those guys. All right, so now you're getting an idea with this kind of slightly strange mind map that there are certain things that really help us in our growth mindset, certain things that help us eliminate our fixed mindset. This is a daily exercise. This is a daily task. I wonder if any of you have heard of the Forth Bridge in Scotland. Excuse me for 1 second. The Forth Bridge over the Firth of Forth, I kid you not, that's not even a tongue twister, it's a real thing. There is a bridge called the Forth Bridge, and it's over the Firth of Forth in Scotland. It's an extremely exposed bridge. I imagine it's a little bit like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Fran. Obviously, San Fran is a bit more spectacular and it's a bit bigger, but it's incredibly exposed, right? The Forth Bridge. It's right kind of by the sea, and there's salt in the air, and there's terrible weather. And there are people whose job it is to paint the Forth Bridge. And here's what they do. This is like the task of Sisyphus, if anybody knows a little bit about Greek mythology. My mother was Greek, so it was compulsory. But in the Forth Bridge, they start to paint the bridge. There's a group of people. If you ever drive across the Forth Bridge, they'll be painting the bridge. Someone will be painting the bridge because of the corrosion and the salt and the weather and the sea and all of that dreadful stuff. And they start at one end, and it probably takes them 10 years, 8 to 10 years to paint the bridge. They get to the other end of the bridge. The bridge is now painted. And what do? They get in the cars, they go to the other end of the bridge, and they start again. There's never a day when they're not painting the Forth Bridge. They paint the bridge, and then they go back and paint the bridge again. And they do this in like 8-10 year cycles, right? They paint the bridge, go start, 8 years later go back to it, and they keep going. And there was an expression in the UK which is, it's like the Forth Bridge. And what we mean by we don't mean the fourth, first, second, third, fourth, we mean F-O-R-T-H, as in not with a U, right? The fourth bridge, the bridge on the River Forth, right? It's like the fourth bridge. In other words, it's a never-ending task. A never-ending task. It's like painting the fourth bridge, right? That's an expression in the UK. This is that. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. If you're a leader, this is your fourth bridge, right? This is the bridge over the first or fourth, right? This is what you do. Constantly, every day, you work on this. Not just sometimes. There won't be a day when you think, I've nailed it, right? You have to work on this every single day. I'll just for giggles, I'll tell you a few of the things that fall in each of these things so you get more of an idea, and then you can maybe think, do you know what? Let's figure it out. Let's figure out how a good driver I am or what kind of a bad driver I am. So just give me a second and we'll have a look at a few of these things. So I mentioned a few minutes ago about the importance of being solutions-oriented, being possibility-oriented. So I can't fail to mention that one. I think that's an important one. Well, let's be honest, they're all really, really important. So if you are possibility-oriented, you have the quote-unquote the right amount of worry. In other words, our worry levels are not too high. If we worry too much about things, if we always catastrophize, if we're Chicken Little and we think the sky's about to fall in every 5 seconds, then we've got to figure out how do we dial down our worry. If we're possibilities oriented, we've probably got the right kind of decisiveness gene, right? So that we make good decisions quickly. Talked earlier about course correcting and all of that kind of stuff. So we need to have the right kind of decisiveness. Possibilities orientation means that we are open to change, right? If we have a very, very low change response, right, or resistance to change, that's going to be a problem. So we have to we have to make sure that we're okay in terms of change. And creativity. Creativity needs to be improved. Can we improve our creativity? Yeah, absolutely we can. We work with a lot of our leaders, making sure that we help them get more creative. Creativity is so important for leadership. What about values discomfort? We talked about values discomfort somewhere here, all right? Values discomfort. Let's pick one of these. Let's say thriving under uncertainty. That means we've got to have the right amount of deliberateness. How good is your deliberateness? How good is your follow through? If you've got very low follow through, that's going to be a problem, right? What about structure? Structure is so important for leaders. Policies and structures and organization and planning, short-term planning, medium-term planning, long-term planning. We've got to be really, really good. We have to be structured. We have to have the right amount of structure. Let's say that. What about composure under pressure? Here we go in terms of value discomfort. Composure under pressure is about the right kind of intensity. It's about the right kind of crisis response. We need you to be good in a crisis, right? And recover quickly from a crisis. You've got to have the right kind of emotion. In other words, not too high. Some things we want you to have a high amount, like decisiveness. Some things we want you to have a low amount, like need for approval. And some things, we want you to have a middle amount, which is emotion, right? So it's a very Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, right? This whole thing about mindset is about getting those balances right and constantly tweaking the gauges so that we can be optimal in terms of our leadership. Let's think about somebody that sets limitations on themselves. Over here, in a fixed mindset, right? What about bound by routine? That's about creativity. It's about learning. It's about change response. What about that pessimism? It's about recovery time. If you have a very low recovery time, you would tend to be more pessimistic. Poor crisis response. We talked about that a few moments ago. Self-assurance. That self-assurance is so important. Can we build that self-assurance? Yeah, of course we can. We've just got to recognize that it gets a low score when we benchmark it against other leaders, and then we do something about it. When we know what the issue is, after we've taken the blood test and the MRI and the X-ray and the family history, then we know what the solution looks like. Okay, I think I've said enough for today. So before we part ways today, genuinely, we'd love to hear from you. After watching this episode, would you say that you have A, a growth mindset, B, a fixed mindset, or C, well, a blend of both depending on the situation. Don't like that answer. So give us an A, B, or C. Just put your bum on a horse. Are you growth mindseted or are you fixed mindseted? You've only got one bum and there's only one horse. So leave an A or a B, if you must, a C in the comments, and let's see where the majority of our fans lie. Thanks ever so much for tuning in to another episode today. Do appreciate it. As always, hope you valued this. I hope it's given you something to think about, even if it's just something that's going to improve your leadership ability by just 1%. I'm happy with our 1%. 1% every day. Immense power and marginal gains over time. So last time, be sure to like, follow and subscribe so that you don't miss out on all the future episodes just like this one. And in the next episode, next episode's great. We're going to be talking about some of the stuff that we talked about today. We're going to be talking about courage and comfort zones. Nice. So if you or your people lead towards a fixed mindset, you definitely won't want it next week, right? So if you don't know whether you have a fixed or a growth mindset, if you show up next week, you probably have a growth mindset. Well done. I'm Antonio Garrido with My Daily Leadership. Thanks for being here. Until next time, by wisdom and effort. See you soon. Bye.